Anna Bligh's Queensland Labor government appears on track for a political wipeout in Saturday's state election. At the end of a long and nasty campaign, opinion polls suggest Queensland Labor will be reduced to a rump of barely a dozen seats and may face a decade or more in the political wilderness. The election will be won and lost on state issues, but it will be keenly watched by Julia Gillard's federal Labor government because Queensland also holds the key to its electoral future. John Taylor reports from Brisbane on how it came to this.
Cheerios for breakfast. Do you like bananas?
She's calling it the Bligh Blitz, Queensland Premier Anna Bligh's crisscrossing of the state in a final rush around dozens of electorates. But it's looking more like a farewell tour, and the government's final ads amount to a concession of defeat.
He'll probably win on Saturday, and by a big margin. But with Campbell's web of deals, be careful how much power you give him. A massive majority gives him a massive amount of power, and that's never a good thing.
Latest polls point to an electoral wipeout that could see Labor left with its worst result in decades, facing a long period in opposition. They suggest Labor may win around a dozen spots in an 89-seat parliament. Anna Bligh is warning of the dangers of an LNP landslide.
Think long and hard about giving Campbell Newman and the LNP an unfettered power to do what they like.
Labor has held power since Wayne Goss toppled the National Party in 1989, except for a few years in the 90s. Perhaps the electorate's just tired of Labor, but Anna Bligh has been haunted by controversial asset sales announced right after the last election. There have been administrative woes as well, like a health department seemingly in constant crisis, and a former minister jailed for corruption. The man apparently heading for the premiership is former Army officer and Brisbane Lord Mayor Campbell Newman.
In terms of what I say to you today, that we're not taking anything for granted. We'll be fighting until 6 p.m. and if we're elected as the government, on day one we've made commitments in that contract I've handed out today to people to get going with the job of fixing up Queensland. So I've always said it was going to be tough. I've always been saying that every single vote counts, and we are fighting up until 6 p.m.
In a signal to voters, he not only wants to govern but is ready to do it, he's released a plan for his first 100 days in office. It includes issuing to the whole of government a 4% unemployment target to combat the current rate of 5.7%, which is the highest on the mainland. But Campbell Newman is a risk taker. He's trying to be Premier when he's not even a Member of Parliament.
I've never seen a contest where the leader of a party has been contesting a seat that they don't own in order to get to be leader after the election, and where that seat has required a 7% swing to be won in the first place.
That's certainly intense, isn't it?
Pity the people of Ashgrove in recent weeks, the Brisbane electorate that Campbell Newman has chosen for his launching pad. So you've been polled quite a number of times?
3 times in the last week, but that was all.
Well, you get a lot of people waving at you, and for a real estate agent, that's not very unusual. I think it puts a little people at off their game a bit. You know, they're not used to seeing this type of American, almost bordering on American-style campaigning.
While Greater Brisbane is the key election battleground, Ashgrove, in the city's inner west, is the most watched contest of all. Ashgrove is a safe Labor seat, held with a margin of 7.1%. But the two federal seats that take in the same streets of Ashgrove are held by the Liberal National Party. And the local government seats for the same area are too held by the LNP. So while at first glance it seems like Campbell Newman has picked a tough fight, the Conservatives are betting that some of that federal and local support will come his way. 32-year-old Kate Jones is the young career Labor politician who currently represents Ashgrove. Labor has smothered her in resources. Its dream, wish, last hope is that the LNP takes government, but Campbell Newman doesn't get into Parliament.
This is the most important seat, I think, for my community, but also for both sides of politics.
In a sign of how serious she is, she gave up being a minister to concentrate on Campbell Newman. And a local debate last week shows there's no love lost.
Well, John, I think when life throws you a curveball, like I was throwing late last year, you know, Campbell Newman doesn't live here, so obviously we weren't thinking that he was going to run for a seat he doesn't live in. I had the opportunity to really stop and reflect about what is important to me.
Labor has spent much of this campaign attacking Campbell Newman's propriety and integrity, particularly over a series of developer donations while he was Brisbane's Lord Mayor.
We've come a long way since the 1980s, when the old Nationals were running the show. We know what corruption was around then. Mr Newman needs to come clean. He can clear all this up by just telling people what he knows and what his interests are.
But that line of attack was effectively shut down when the state's Crime and Misconduct Commission announced it had found no evidence of official misconduct. While there's been considerable doubt whether Campbell Newman could win Ashgrove, a new poll today shows his support surging. But suburban Ashgrove is a battleground, and both candidates will fight to the finish.
It's very tough. It's very tough. I mean, the Labor Party are pretending that that somehow we're just going to blitz it. And I can assure people we will not win this election unless people change their vote.
I've made a decision very early in the piece, John, that I was going to fight this street to street, door to door, suburb to suburb, and that's exactly what I've done.
In a last-gasp effort to avoid annihilation, Labor today wheeled in one of its old big guns.
The polls don't look good, we know that. But that is no reason not to fight. And I've been so proud of you, Anna, the way you've put your nose to the grindstone and really are fighting out to the last moment, and you too, because your seat is extremely important.
But while some party faithful may think Bob Hawke can walk on water, nothing short of a political miracle will save Labor from an electoral wipeout this weekend.